Just adjust the projections upward by 15%. Marcus Sullivan slid the quarterly report back across the conference table, his gold cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. The board meeting's tomorrow. These numbers need to look better. I stared at the document, my coffee going cold in my hand. 23 years old, fresh MBA. First real corporate job at Harrison Analytics. 6 months in, and my boss was asking me to fabricate financial data. I can't do that, I said, keeping my voice steady. These are actual client retention figures. If I inflate them, you're not inflating anything. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You're presenting a more optimistic scenario. There's a difference. My phone sat face down on the table between us. I'd brought my personal device to this 4 p.m. meeting at his request. The office beyond his glass walls had already emptied for the day. Marcus, if auditors review this, let me worry about auditors. He stood buttoning his jacket. I need the revised version by 7 tonight. The door opened. Pamela from HR stepped inside, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. I felt my stomach drop. Actually, Marcus said, we need to discuss your future here. Security walked me to my desk 15 minutes later. The termination had been efficient, clinical. Pamela cited failure to meet performance standards and resistance to supervisory guidance. My protests about the falsification request went unrecorded. Marcus watched from his office doorway, arms crossed, as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. My hands shook as I grabbed the framed photo of my parents, the coffee mug my roommate gave me, the small succulent that had survived my first month. Around me, the few remaining colleagues suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Nobody met my eyes. This way, please. The security guard, an older man named Tom who'd always been friendly, wouldn't look at me either. In the elevator he finally spoke. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I nodded, throat tight. The box felt heavier with each floor we descended. This wasn't just stuff. It was proof I'd existed here. Evidence of early mornings and late nights, of believing this job mattered. The lobby doors slid open to the parking garage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once. 3 times. I shifted the box to check the screen. Unknown number. I drove home on autopilot, the phone calls unanswered in my cup holder. My apartment was dark when I arrived. My roommate, Tyler, worked night shifts at the hospital. I was grateful for the silence. I set the box on the kitchen counter and stared at it. Everything felt unreal. This morning I'd had a career. Future. Now I had a cardboard box and a firing that would follow me to every interview. I should call someone. My parents. My best friend, Ashley. Someone who'd tell me it would be okay. Instead, I opened my laptop. The documents were exactly where I'd left them. Personal cloud storage, encrypted folder. I'd started saving copies 3 months ago. The first time Marcus had casually mentioned massaging numbers for stakeholder confidence. Back then, I'd told myself I was being paranoid. That successful people took calculated risks. That my rigid ethics were a product of inexperience. I opened the first file. An email from Marcus at 11:47 p.m., 3 months earlier. Take a look at the attached projections. See if we can find a more encouraging narrative for Q2. Client confidence is everything. I'd responded professionally, suggesting ways to highlight positive trends without altering actual data. His next email had been less subtle. The messages formed a pattern I hadn't wanted to see. July 15th. Marcus praising my fresh perspective, while asking if certain metrics could be interpreted more favorably. July 28th. Him changing figures in a shared spreadsheet after I'd logged off, my approval signature still attached to the altered version. August 3rd. Me confronting him in his office. His response, smooth and patronizing. That's how leadership works. You'll understand eventually. August 10th. The first time he explicitly asked me to modify raw data. I'd refused. Politely. Professionally. Terrified. August 12th. My workload suddenly doubled. Projects I'd spent weeks on were reassigned to Brandon, the analyst who never questioned anything. I documented it all without consciously deciding to. Screenshots, forwarded emails to my personal account, voice memos after particularly tense meetings, capturing my immediate recollection of conversations. Not because I planned to use them, because I needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. The clock read 9:34 p.m. My phone sat beside the laptop, the unknown number having called 4 more times. I picked it up and dialed voicemail. Ms. Brooks, this is Gerald Hammond from Harrison Analytics Legal Department. It's urgent we speak. Please return this call regardless of the hour. My finger hovered over the callback button. I called at 9:47 p.m. Gerald Hammond answered on the first ring. His voice was crisp, alert despite the hour. Ms. Brooks, thank you for returning my call. I need to ask you some direct questions about your termination today. I was fired for refusing to falsify a report. Silence. Then, did you document this request? Yes. How extensively? I looked at my laptop screen, folders within folders of evidence. Very. Don't discuss this with anyone from Harrison Analytics. No former colleagues, no supervisors. If Marcus Sullivan or anyone from the company contacts you, document it but don't respond. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? 8 a.m., the Riverside Cafe on 4th Street. Not at our offices. Why not your offices? Because your termination triggered an automatic review that revealed irregularities in multiple quarterly reports. Reports that were altered after you submitted them. We need to know what you know before certain people realize we're looking. My mouth went dry. Who else knows about this meeting? Only the general counsel and myself. We're moving carefully. After he hung up, I sat in the dark apartment processing. They weren't calling to threaten me. They were calling because my firing had exposed something bigger. Marcus had made a mistake. He'd thought getting rid of me would solve his problem. Instead, he'd created a new one. Barely slept. At 7:30 a.m., I stood outside the Riverside Cafe, dressed in the navy suit I'd worn to my job interview 6 months ago. Gerald Hammond sat at a corner table, late 50s, silver hair, expensive briefcase. A younger woman sat beside him, laptop open. This is Claire Watson, Assistant General Counsel, he said as I sat. Everything discussed here is confidential. Claire slid a document across the table. This is a cooperation agreement. It protects you from any liability related to the altered reports and prevents the company from taking legal action against you for your testimony. In exchange, you provide us with all documentation you possess regarding financial irregularities. I read it twice. What happens to Marcus? That depends on what you can show us, Gerald said. Right now we have suspicions. We need proof. Pulled out my laptop. Where should I start? For the next 3 hours I walked them through everything. The midnight emails. The changed spreadsheets. The meeting where Marcus had explicitly told me to adjust retention figures upward. Claire's expression remained neutral, but her fingers flew across her keyboard. Gerald asked precise questions, drilling into timelines and specific numbers. This voice memo, he said, pointing to a file dated August 10th. Can you play it? Click. My own voice filled the quiet cafe. Marcus Sullivan just asked me directly to change client retention numbers from 62% to 77% for the Q3 report. I told him I couldn't do that. He said, and I'm quoting, "You're either part of the solution or part of the problem." Meeting ended 3:47 p.m. Gerald and Claire exchanged glances. "We need copies of everything," Claire said. "That depends on what you can show us," Gerald said. "Right now we have suspicions. We need proof." Pulled out my laptop. Where should I start? For the next 3 hours I walked them through everything. The midnight emails. The changed spreadsheets. The meeting where Marcus had explicitly told me to adjust retention figures upward. Claire's expression remained neutral, but her fingers flew across her keyboard. Gerald asked precise questions, drilling into timelines and specific numbers. "This voice memo," he said, pointing to a file dated August 10th. "Can you play it?" Click. My own voice filled the quiet cafe. Marcus Sullivan just asked me directly to change client retention numbers from 62% to 77% for the Q3 report. I told him I couldn't do that. He said, and I'm quoting, "You're either part of the solution or part of the problem." Meeting ended 3:47 p.m. Gerald and Claire exchanged glances. "We need copies of everything," Claire said. I uploaded the files to their secure server while Gerald made calls in his car. Claire bought me coffee I couldn't drink. "This is more extensive than we expected. You've essentially documented a pattern of systematic financial misrepresentation." "I just saved emails." "You saved the right emails." She closed her laptop. "The board has been reviewing quarterly performance, and certain trends didn't match field reports. Your termination yesterday created a flag in our compliance system. Any financial analyst fired within 30 days of a board review triggers automatic investigation. When we pulled your reports, we found post-submission alterations. Your digital signature on versions you never created. He used my login. We're determining that now. But these files you've provided show motive, method, and timeline. This moves from suspicious to actionable." Gerald returned, jaw tight. "The General Counsel is convening an emergency review. Ms. Brooks, you're going to need to provide formal testimony to the board's audit committee. Are you prepared to do that?" I thought about Marcus's face yesterday, watching security escort me out. The colleagues who'd avoided my eyes. The career I'd thought was over. "Yes." "Good. Don't go home yet. We need you to review additional documents we've pulled. See if anything contradicts your records." "Why can't I go home?" "Because in about 4 hours Marcus Sullivan is going to realize his problem just became our investigation." They set me up in a conference room at a law firm 2 blocks from Harrison Analytics headquarters. For 6 hours, I reviewed financial reports spanning 18 months. Every document Claire presented, I cross-referenced against my saved versions. The pattern was unmistakable. Original submissions. Accurate, conservative, reflecting actual client data. Final versions presented to the board. Optimistic, inflated, showing steady growth that didn't exist. My name was attached to all of them. "He's been doing this since before I was hired," I said, looking up from the 10th altered report. "We believe so," Claire confirmed. "But your refusal to participate disrupted his system. He couldn't risk you contradicting the narrative. So he fired me." "So he fired you." Gerald entered with fresh coffee. "Unfortunately for him, he also created a paper trail. The termination paperwork cites your refusal to adopt recommended reporting methodologies as cause. Pamela from HR has been very cooperative in clarifying what that phrase meant. She knew. She knew he wanted you gone. She didn't know why. When we showed her the altered reports with your forged approvals, she became significantly more forthcoming about the termination meeting. Marcus told her you were undermining team cohesion. He never mentioned the falsification request. My phone buzzed. "Marcus Sullivan. Third call today." "Don't answer," Gerald said. "But keep a record of every attempt to contact you." The calls continued throughout the afternoon. Marcus, then Brandon, then Pamela, then numbers I didn't recognize. At 6 p.m., Claire showed me her screen. "Your former boss just hired a lawyer." The next morning, Marcus's attorney sent a cease and desist letter claiming I'd stolen proprietary company information. Gerald read it in the conference room. His expression amused. "This is desperation. Every document you provided was either sent to you directly or created by you. You have legal right to maintain copies of your own work. What happens now? Now we let him escalate. Desperation creates mistakes." He set the letter aside. "The board review is scheduled for Monday. 3 days. You'll testify about the falsification requests, the altered reports, and the timeline leading to your termination. Expect hostile questions. Marcus's attorney will try to paint you as a disgruntled employee fabricating allegations. But I have proof. You have documentation. They'll question its authenticity, your motives, your interpretation of events. Stick to facts. Don't embellish or speculate. Claire added. They'll ask why you didn't report this earlier. Have an answer ready. Thought about this. I was 23, 6 months into my first real job. He was a senior vice president with 15 years at the company. I documented everything because I was terrified of being blamed for something I didn't do. Perfect. Don't change a word of that. Over the weekend I prepared. Gerald sent practice questions. Claire reviewed my timeline for inconsistencies. I rewrote my account of the termination meeting 8 times until it was exact, unemotional, irrefutable. Sunday night Marcus called again. Then texted. We need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. I can fix this. I forwarded the message to Gerald. His response. Excellent. He's offering to fix something you haven't publicly accused him of. Save everything. Monday morning, I entered Harrison Analytics headquarters through the executive entrance. The board's audit committee met in a secure conference room on the top floor. 8 members sat around an oval table. The board chair, 5 independent directors, the CFO, and the general counsel. Marcus sat across from me, flanked by his attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in a gray suit. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. The chair, a woman named Victoria Brennan, opened the proceedings. Ms. Brooks, you're here voluntarily to provide testimony regarding financial reporting irregularities. You're not under oath, but we expect complete honesty. Do you understand? Yes. Please describe in your own words the events leading to your termination. I did. Starting with the first email, the first subtle request to adjust the narrative. I walked them through Marcus's escalating pressure, my documented refusals, the isolation that followed, the meeting where he demanded I inflate retention figures by 15%, the termination that occurred when I refused. I spoke for 40 minutes. Nobody interrupted. When I finished, Marcus's attorney leaned forward. Ms. Brooks, isn't it true you were terminated for performance issues unrelated to these alleged requests? No. The termination paperwork cites failure to meet standards. The paperwork cites my refusal to adopt recommended reporting methodologies. I can provide the email where Marcus explicitly defined that as adjusting numbers upward. You claim to have documented everything. Isn't it possible you created this documentation after your firing to justify a wrongful termination lawsuit? No. Every file has metadata showing creation dates. The voice memos have timestamps. The emails have server records. Claire slid a tablet across the table. We verified all metadata. Nothing was created or modified after her termination. The attorney shifted tactics. Why didn't you report these requests through proper channels? I was afraid. Marcus was my direct supervisor. HR reports to him. I didn't know who to trust. So you kept silent. I documented everything and waited for a safe opportunity. My termination created that opportunity. Victoria Brennan studied me. What do you want from this process, Ms. Brooks? I want my name cleared. I want the truth on record. I don't want to be blamed for financial misrepresentation I tried to prevent. The committee questioned Marcus for 2 hours. I wasn't allowed to stay, but Claire gave me updates. He denied everything. Claimed I'd misunderstood his requests. Suggested I'd altered the reports myself and was now attempting to shift blame. Then they showed him the voice memo. His story changed. The requests were hypothetical scenario planning. He never meant for me to actually change official figures. I'd overreacted due to inexperience. They showed him the spreadsheet version histories. His attorney requested a recess. When the hearing resumed, Marcus's defense had shifted again. He'd made errors in judgment under pressure from the board to show growth. Any alterations were mistakes, not fraud. He'd never intended to deceive anyone. That's 3 different explanations, Claire told me in the hallway. The committee notices these things. At 4 p.m., Victoria Brennan delivered the preliminary finding. Marcus Sullivan was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full forensic audit. All reports he'd submitted in the past 2 years would be reviewed. Independent auditors would verify the altered documents. I was offered 2 options: financial settlement with confidentiality agreement, or reinstatement with full back pay and cleared personnel record. Can I think about it? You have 72 hours. That evening, Marcus called from a blocked number. I didn't answer, but the voicemail was revealing. This is insane. You're destroying my career over a misunderstanding. I was trying to help you learn corporate reality. If you'd just listened. His voice cracked. Please, call me. We can still fix this. I saved the recording and sent it to Gerald. His response: he's unraveling. Don't engage. Tuesday morning, the news broke internally. A former colleague, Kevin, texted me. Holy shit. Company-wide email just went out. Ongoing investigation into financial reporting practices. Is this about you? I didn't respond. By noon, 3 more former colleagues had reached out. By evening, my phone was constant notifications. People who'd ignored me during my escort out now wanted information, validation, gossip. I blocked all of them except Kevin, who'd always been decent. Wednesday, Gerald called. The forensic audit found irregularities in 43 separate reports over 21 months. The pattern is clear. Numbers were systematically inflated to mask declining client retention. The board is furious. Marcus Sullivan is finished. What about me? That's why I'm calling. The board wants to offer you a revised settlement. Full vindication. Your personnel file will be corrected. They'll provide written confirmation you were terminated without cause, and they're offering 8 months' salary plus benefits. In exchange, you sign a standard confidentiality agreement about the investigation details. Not reinstatement. They're concerned about workplace dynamics. Multiple employees were complicit through silence. Coming back might be uncomfortable. He was right. The thought of returning to that office, those people who'd watched me leave. I'll take the settlement. Smart choice. One more thing. Marcus's attorney contacted us. He wants to settle privately with you to prevent you from cooperating with any regulatory investigations. There are regulatory investigations. The board reported the findings to the SEC this morning. Financial misrepresentation of this scale, if it affected public statements or investor documents, could trigger federal scrutiny. Your testimony becomes very valuable to regulators. What should I do? Nothing. The board's legal team is handling coordination with regulators. You're protected by the cooperation agreement. Marcus, however, is not. Thursday, I signed the settlement agreement. The document was thorough. Harrison Analytics acknowledged my termination was without proper cause. My personnel file would reflect mutual separation, with eligible for rehire status. They provided a neutral reference letter emphasizing my integrity and analytical skills. 8-month severance, continued health coverage, and a cash payment covering legal fees I hadn't yet incurred. Most importantly, a formal letter to my file stating, subsequent investigation determined Ms. Brooks's refusal to alter financial reports was correct and aligned with company policy and professional ethics. Her termination was based on incomplete information and is regretted. Claire walked me through every clause. This protects you completely. The confidentiality provision only covers internal investigation details. You can discuss your experience generally, just not specific board deliberations or other employees' testimony. What happens to Marcus? That's still unfolding. The board terminated him this morning. His attorney is negotiating severance terms, but given the audit findings, he has limited leverage. The SEC investigation will determine if criminal charges are warranted. I stared at the document. A week ago, I'd been fired, humiliated, convinced my career was over. Now I held a legal acknowledgement that I'd been right all along. What if I'd just changed those numbers? Yes. Then you'd be facing the same investigation he is. You'd have lost your credibility, possibly your license, definitely your integrity. Claire closed her laptop. You chose correctly. It wasn't easy, but it was correct. I signed the papers. Gerald shook my hand. You're one of the good ones. Don't let this experience make you cynical. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after my termination, I received an email from Victoria Brennan. Ms. Brooks, the board has completed its preliminary review of the financial reporting irregularities you brought to light. I wanted to personally thank you for your courage and integrity. Your refusal to compromise professional ethics, despite significant pressure and career risk, exemplifies the standards we strive to maintain. While we cannot undo the injustice of your termination, we hope the settlement terms demonstrate our commitment to making this right. Should you need references for future opportunities, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. I read it 3 times. Then I opened LinkedIn and updated my profile. Former financial analyst at Harrison Analytics. I didn't mention the termination or the investigation, just the dates and a simple description of my analytical work. Within 2 hours, I had 6 connection requests from recruiters. By Monday, I had 3 interview requests. Tuesday, Marcus Sullivan's profile disappeared from LinkedIn entirely. Kevin texted, "Word is Marcus is being investigated by the SEC. The company's cooperating fully. He's done." I didn't reply, but I felt something shift. Not satisfaction exactly. Just the quiet certainty that the truth had worked. Wednesday, I interviewed at a consulting firm specializing in financial compliance. The interviewer asked about my departure from Harrison. I was terminated after refusing to falsify financial reports. The company later acknowledged the termination was without cause and provided a settlement reflecting that. May I contact Harrison Analytics for verification? Yes. I can provide the general counsel's direct line. I got the job offer Thursday. 2 months later, I started at Kirkwood Compliance Group as a junior analyst. My first assignment, reviewing a client's internal financial reporting procedures. My supervisor, an experienced auditor named Janet Peterson, gave me the files. Look for anything that seems inconsistent or manipulated. Trust your instincts. I found irregularities within 3 hours. Janet reviewed my notes. Good catch. This is exactly the kind of creative accounting that gets companies in trouble. How'd you spot it so quickly? Experience. She looked at me curiously but didn't press. That evening I got an email from the SEC. They were conducting a formal investigation into Harrison Analytics' financial reporting practices and requested my cooperation. A meeting was scheduled for the following week. I called Gerald. They want to interview me. Expected. You're a witness, not a target. Answer honestly. Provide the documentation you've already shared with us, and you'll be fine. Will Marcus be there? Absolutely not. You'll speak with investigators separately. The SEC interview lasted 4 hours. 2 agents, meticulous questions, every detail examined. I walked them through the timeline, provided copies of my documentation, and answered questions about company culture and reporting procedures. Did anyone else at Harrison Analytics know about the falsification? One agent asked. I don't know. I only reported to Marcus. But the alterations happened at a systemic level. Someone in IT or finance had to notice the version histories. We're investigating that. Thank you for your cooperation. 3 weeks later, the SEC announced formal charges against Marcus Sullivan for securities fraud and making false statements to investors. The investigation was ongoing, but the initial charges carried potential prison time. I didn't feel victorious. Mostly I felt tired, and grateful, and painfully aware of how easily it could have gone differently. Ashley, my best friend since college, took me to dinner the night the SEC announcement went public. You're a literal whistleblower now. That's intense. I just refused to lie. Most people would have signed the altered report, kept their job, and convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. She raised her glass. You didn't. That matters. It almost cost me everything. But it didn't. Because you documented everything like a paranoid person. I laughed. Gerald called it appropriate professional caution. I call it being smart enough to protect yourself. She grew serious. What Marcus did was try to make you complicit. When you refused, he tried to eliminate you. Both failed because you were prepared. 6 months after my termination, the SEC case went to trial. I testified for 2 days. Marcus's defense attempted to paint me as vindictive, but the documentation was irrefutable. The voice memos, the emails, the version histories, all of it corroborated by independent forensic analysis. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Sullivan was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to affected investors. 1 year after walking out of Harrison Analytics with a cardboard box, I was promoted to senior analyst at Kirkwood Compliance. My specialty: identifying and preventing financial reporting fraud. I trained new employees on documentation protocols, ethical escalation procedures, and how to protect themselves when reporting irregularities. I taught them what I'd learned the hard way. Always save copies, always timestamp communications, always trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Victoria Brennan became a reference and occasional mentor. She'd left Harrison Analytics board after the scandal but remained respected in corporate governance circles. Over coffee one afternoon she told me, "You saved that company from far worse consequences. If the falsification had continued another year, the SEC penalties would have been catastrophic. Your refusal to participate limited the damage." I didn't think about it that way. I just knew it was wrong. That's exactly why it mattered. You didn't calculate consequences or weigh career impact. You had a simple ethical line and refused to cross it. She smiled. Those are the people who change systems. I thought about that often. About how one decision, one refusal, had redirected everything. If I'd signed that altered report, I might still be at Harrison Analytics, working for Marcus, complicit in fraud I didn't want to admit to myself. Instead, I'd been fired, humiliated, terrified, and then vindicated. The story got picked up by a financial ethics blog. Someone at Harrison Analytics had leaked details, and a journalist contacted me for comment. I declined, citing the confidentiality agreement. But the article ran anyway, painting me as an anonymous whistleblower who'd exposed systematic fraud. My phone rang within hours. A podcast wanted an interview. A professional organization wanted me to speak at their ethics conference. A law school asked if I'd participate in a panel on corporate accountability. I accepted the conference invitation. Standing before 200 compliance professionals, I told the sanitized version of my story. The pressure to falsify, the documentation, the termination, the investigation, the vindication. What I learned, I concluded, is that protecting yourself isn't the same as being suspicious. It's being realistic about power dynamics. I was replaceable to Marcus. The truth wasn't. The applause felt strange. I hadn't done anything heroic. I just refused to lie and gotten lucky that my documentation held up under scrutiny. But afterward, a young woman approached me. "I'm in a similar situation. My supervisor keeps asking me to adjust forecasts to match budget targets. I don't know what to do." "Document everything," I told her. "Timestamps, emails, specifics. Don't confront him yet. Build your case first. Then decide whether to escalate or leave. But whatever you do, don't compromise the data." She thanked me, eyes wet. I realized then what Victoria had meant. It wasn't about heroism. It was about showing people that integrity could survive corporate pressure. That you could refuse to participate in corruption and come out intact. Sometimes that was enough. 2 years after my termination, I received an unexpected email. Pamela, the HR director who'd facilitated my firing, had left Harrison Analytics and was starting a consulting practice focused on ethical HR procedures. She wanted to apologize. We met at the same cafe where I'd first met with Gerald and Claire. I should have questioned Marcus more carefully, she said. When he told me you were undermining team cohesion, I took him at his word. I didn't investigate. I didn't ask for your side. I just processed the termination. You were following procedures. I was following orders. There's a difference. She looked genuinely pained. The investigation revealed that Marcus had used similar tactics before, isolating employees who questioned him, then manufacturing performance issues to justify termination. I should have seen the pattern. What changed? When legal showed me the altered reports with your forged approvals, I realized I'd helped him frame you. That made me complicit. She met my eyes. I'm trying to build better systems so HR becomes a genuine resource instead of a tool for silencing problems. I respected that. What do you need from me? Permission to use your case, anonymized, as a training example. How to recognize retaliation. How to verify termination causes. How to protect employees who report misconduct. Use it. If it helps someone else, use it. We talked for another hour about systemic failures and structural changes. About how easily good intentions could be manipulated by bad actors. About the importance of independent verification and documented decision-making. When we parted, she said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you when I should have. You're protecting people now. That counts." 3 years later, I was recruited to head the Ethics and Compliance Division at a regional investment firm. My first major initiative, implementing a protected disclosure system where analysts could report irregularities anonymously without fear of retaliation. Every report went to an independent committee, not through supervisory chains. Within 6 months, we identified and corrected 3 significant accounting errors that could have become serious problems. None of the reporting analysts faced consequences. 2 received commendations for their diligence. The CEO asked me to present the program at a board meeting. This system assumes people want to do the right thing but need protection from retaliation, I explained. It removes the career risk from ethical reporting. One board member challenged me. Doesn't this encourage frivolous complaints from disgruntled employees? It encourages scrutiny, which is exactly what financial oversight requires. I pulled up statistics. 80% of corporate fraud is discovered by employee tips, but most employees don't report because they fear termination. We're removing that barrier. The program was expanded company-wide. I thought often about the paralyzed 23-year-old who'd sat across from Marcus Sullivan, terrified to refuse but more terrified to comply. She'd made the right choice through sheer stubborn principle, not strategy. Now I was building systems so people in her position didn't have to rely on luck and documentation skills. They could report, escalate, and be protected. 5 years after my termination, I was invited to speak at my old business school. Standing in the lecture hall where I'd once learned about financial analysis, I told 200 MBA students about the day I got fired for refusing to falsify a quarterly report. The hardest part wasn't the termination, I said. It was the isolation beforehand, watching colleagues avoid me, having projects stripped away, knowing I was being positioned as the problem when I was trying to prevent one. I showed them the email from Marcus. That's how leadership works. You'll understand eventually. I understood immediately. He was asking me to choose between my job and my integrity. Picked integrity. It cost me my career, temporarily. I walked them through the documentation, the investigation, the vindication. But here's what matters. I didn't document because I planned to blow the whistle. I documented because I was scared. That fear, that instinct that something was wrong was correct. Trust it. During Q&A, a student asked, "Would you do it again?" Absolutely. Because the alternative was compromising who I am for a job that would have destroyed me anyway. Once you falsify one report, you're trapped. Marcus would have owned me. Another student. What if the documentation hadn't held up? What if you'd been wrong? Then I'd have been fired for refusing to follow orders. Which is still better than being fired for fraud. Your reputation is the only asset you truly control. Don't trade it for temporary security. After the lecture, Professor Anderson, who'd taught my corporate ethics course, approached me. You were always so certain about ethical lines. I'm glad that certainty served you well. I was terrified the whole time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite fear. He smiled. You're proof that the principles we teach aren't just theoretical. 10 years after my termination, I published a book. The Exit Plan. Protecting Yourself When Corporate Ethics Fail. It wasn't a memoir. It was a practical guide for employees facing ethical dilemmas. How to document, when to escalate, how to protect yourself legally and financially. The Marcus Sullivan case was one of several examples, anonymized and analyzed. The book sold modestly but found its audience. Compliance officers, HR professionals, young analysts. People who needed to know that principled resistance was possible and survivable. A reviewer wrote, "This book treats ethical courage as a skill that can be learned and practiced, not a personality trait you either have or don't. It's a handbook for people who want to do the right thing but need practical tools to protect themselves while doing it." That was exactly what I'd intended. I still worked in compliance, now as a consultant advising companies on fraud prevention and ethical reporting systems. I'd built a career on the foundation of that one refusal. Marcus Sullivan had been released from prison after serving 3 years. I heard through industry contacts that he'd moved to another state, working in sales. His financial career was over. His reputation destroyed. I felt no satisfaction in that. Just a quiet acknowledgement that consequences had aligned with actions. 15 years later, I received a letter. It came to my office, handwritten, postmarked from a city I didn't recognize. Inside was a single page. Ms. Brooks, you don't know me, but I worked at Harrison Analytics during the investigation. I was one of the people who altered reports when Marcus asked. I never refused like you did. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I was just following orders. When the SEC investigation expanded, I testified about my involvement. I received probation and a fine. I lost my career. I deserved it. But I wanted you to know that your example haunts me. You were younger, less experienced, more vulnerable than I was. And you said no. I should have too. I didn't write this for forgiveness. I wrote because you should know that your choice mattered beyond just your own vindication. It showed the rest of us what we should have done. I'm sorry I didn't have your courage. Anonymous. I read it twice, throat tight. I'd never thought about the other analysts, the ones who'd complied. Their careers destroyed too, but through participation rather than resistance. I filed the letter carefully. Not as validation but as reminder. Individual choices accumulated into systemic outcomes. My refusal had been one data point in a larger pattern. It hadn't changed everything, but it had changed something. 20 years after walking out of Harrison Analytics with a cardboard box, I retired from active consulting. My legacy wasn't the Marcus Sullivan case. It was the dozens of protected disclosure systems I'd helped implement. The hundreds of employees who'd used those systems to report irregularities without fear. The countless instances of fraud prevented because someone felt safe enough to speak up. I taught occasional seminars on corporate ethics. I mentored young compliance officers. I answered emails from people facing situations similar to what I'd experienced. Each time my advice was the same. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself first. Integrity matters more than any single job. And you're not alone. Others have faced this. Others have survived it. You can too. I thought about that 23-year-old often. The one who'd sat across from Marcus Sullivan, terrified and determined, refusing to adjust numbers that she knew were accurate. She'd had no guarantee it would work out. No certainty the documentation would hold up. No assurance that telling the truth would be rewarded rather than punished. She'd just known she couldn't live with the alternative. That instinct, that stubborn, terrified, principled refusal, had redirected everything. Not just my career but my understanding of what professional integrity actually meant. Not grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Just small, daily choices to align actions with values, even when it was costly. Especially when it was costly. The cardboard box from that day sat in my office closet. Kept it a reminder. Not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd refused to surrender. Inside was the coffee mug, the photo, the small succulent that had somehow survived 15 years of irregular watering. And a printed copy of that first email from Gerald Hammond. Your termination triggered an automatic review. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes documentation matters. Sometimes refusing to participate in corruption is enough to expose it. But only if you refuse. I'd refused. And everything else had followed from that single terrifying decision. They'd tried to silence me by firing me. Instead, they'd given me a platform. The truth had spoken louder than their threats. And it always would.